I thank the gentleman from Virginia, and rarely do we share the same kind of background that we do today. Actually, my grandfather worked on the railroad for security in Pine Bluff, Arkansas, and there was never a more honest individual or a hardworking individual. In addition, I have one of my dearest friends, Forrest Jarrett, who is a retired security gentleman from one of the rail industries, and he's admonished me, whatever you do, be good to the guys that work on the rail. And so it is with that in mind that not only do we hold this hearing, but that we look to address some of the bad actors, as the ranking member has talked about. We're here really today to perform one of the committee's core functions, and that's protecting the taxpayer dollars from waste and fraud. And in this case, we're also trying to protect the wallets of every single railroad customer in the country. In the chain of events that brought us here today actually started in the late 1990s when a group of doctors, RRB employees and union officials and railroad workers in the New York area conspired to defraud the Railroad Retirement Board's disability program. Now, this fraud scheme that they cooked up was fairly simple. Union officials and RRB employees connected some railroad employees with crooked doctors who sold phony paperwork for cash, in my opinion, and the railroad employees took phony paperwork to the RRB to support their claims for disability payments. Now, unlike the gentleman to my right's parents and relatives and my grandfather, we couldn't imagine that happening from somebody in our family, and so that is what has brought us here today. By the time they were caught, the fraud ring resulted in the RRB in awarding $1 billion worth of bogus disability claims. As we're going to hear from two of our witnesses today, the RRB remains at risk for similar scams still today. And if we could start the video, please. What we're about to look at here is a Long Island Railroad employee who was simultaneously earning a 5th-degree black belt in jiu-jitsu. Now, when this video was filmed, the man was collecting occupational disability benefits from the RRB, and according to this man's disability application, he suffered from severe pain in his shoulder, lower back, and neck. Maybe it's because of all of this activity. He claimed the pain was so severe that he had difficult times standing, sitting, walking, or bathing and dressing. And the RRB claim examiner determined that he was no longer capable of performing his job because of his physical condition. I would ask each one of you, what do you think? Had the RRB claims examiner had access to this video, I hope that things would have turned out differently. But even still, without the video, there would have been other things that should have struck the examiner as odd. For example, in his last 17 months as a railroad employee, he worked about 1,500 hours of overtime, including the day before he retired with disability working overtime. He claimed that he had trouble doing the basic tasks to manage the work, massive amount of overtime until the very last day of retiring. But the RRB claimed that examiners don't ask those sort of questions. As the Inspector General will tell us, they just rubber stamp it. Now, the man in the video was only one of many individuals involved in this fraud scheme. There were others who were observed by the investigators competing in golf tournaments, playing tennis, participating in a 400-mile bike ride, and even hiking Mount Kilimanjaro. The RRB's disability benefits program is a crucial safety net for rail workers who are injured due to the demanding nature of the job. And we must protect it from fraud so that it can serve those who suffer from legitimate disabilities. Now, all of this came to light in 2008, and the IG began making immediate recommendations addressing the potential areas that undermine the disability application process. And the first of the IG's recommendations was in 2008. And since that time, the IG has issued nearly 70 other recommendations in response to the Long Island Railroad fraud scheme. Yet, according to the IG, it appears that only 5, now get that, 5 of 70 recommendations have been fully implemented. In February of last year, the Inspector General issued a 7-day letter. Now, a 7-day letter is kind of a last resort tool that the Inspector Generals use. It's kind of basically like the government's equivalent of pulling a fire alarm, saying, wait, we've got a real problem here. So what's the fire? Well, the national approval rate for disability applications remains just as high as it was when the LIRR fraud scheme was bilking the RRB out of billions of dollars. Sounds like not much has changed, and I look forward to hearing from Mr. Dickman and Mr. Boutoni about the problems that they've identified and about their recommendations to fix those problems. But what I really want to hear today will come from you, Mr. Schwartz. You can tell us why these problems still persist and haven't been fixed after all these years. More importantly, when can we expect to hear that the RRB is finally taking some meaningful actions to ensure that the program remains available for those that are truly in need?